We are live. Welcome back to another episode of the Thumb Strong podcast. So, today we're going to be talking about kind of training 101. So, I want to dive into strength training, hypertrophy or muscle building, endurance training, explain each one in a simple way for people to understand. So, I was having a conversation with a few members in class just this past week about kind of the different types of training, and especially with like the rest periods and why we do certain things a certain way. Within fit camp, we've got usually like a heavier strength with the barbell where I tell them to rest 1 to 2 minutes realistically. As we'll get into, it could be even more than that. We always usually do an accessory or an isolation movement, which we'll get into, more of a moderate rep range. And then with our metcons, our conditioning, it's usually very, very fast paced. And so a lot of people, they're so used to those fast paced metcons, when they go and do the strength, they think they got to do that super fast too. And as we'll get into, we want to explain why you need to actually slow down depending on which kind of modality, or not modality, but which stimulus you're focusing on. Is it going to be strength, building muscle, or building endurance? So that's how we're going to kind of dive into. So we want to get into first what lifting weights actually does. So this is kind of the easy science behind, okay, what are we actually doing by lifting weights? Why do we lift weights, right? So when you lift, you're actually going to create, when you're doing like any kind of resistance training, so think using a barbell, a dumbbell, a kettlebell, anything where you're lifting weights, you're doing strength training, you're creating little micro tears in the muscle, and your body is essentially saying, okay, whatever we're doing, it's breaking down the muscle. We need to rebuild it and make that stronger so that it's ready and capable for the next time this happens. Because it's not like your body knows what you're doing. It just knows that something's happening to it. Something's breaking down, right? So it's trying to grow back stronger and make those muscles a little bit bigger, right? So that's kind of like the trigger or what's actually happening. Resistance training itself is going to improve kind of the three things that we're talking about. So strength is the ability to push, pull, lift, and carry more weight. So your overall strength is better. Muscle size, so your muscles get firmer, more defined, more shapely. So this would be like the toned or lean look that people would want. And then we have the endurance, so the ability to repeat work without fatigue or fatiguing as fast. So think like stamina, things like that, right? So research shows that almost all rep ranges can build muscle if the effort is high. So how you train influences which adaptation is going to be maximized. So if you choose to lift heavy, you're going to gain strength. If you want moderate weight, it's going to be easier to build more muscle. Lightweight will help improve that endurance or stamina. Okay. So let's dive into strength training first.
Before we move on really quick, I got some stuff to add.
Okay.
So, like lifting weights in general, like the micro tears, yes, it occurs, but then depending on which type of training you're doing, it's going to happen at different levels.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're focusing on the muscle, like gain, muscle size, the hypertrophy version, which we'll go into, that's when more of the little micro tears is going to happen. The mechanical tension, like especially for strength, when you have that stimulus of something really heavy on your body does adapt differently than the other types of resistance training. And then the same thing with endurance is like a little bit of resistance. It's not really going to create as many muscle tears,
right,
but it'll just get more of that burn essentially.
Yeah.
And like for lifting weights, just to break it down a little bit more, is like obviously like the micro tears are happening, like that's what's changing in your body. But what's happening is when, say you're doing like a bicep curl, right? So this muscle here is attached to just bones. And so it's not just like the muscle that's lifting, it's your whole body, like your skeletal structure, your muscles, everything that's lifting and supporting this weight. So structurally, it's the bone technically that's lifting the muscle, or that's lifting the weight, and the muscle is pulling on the bone to move it. And depending on what type of strength training you're doing, changes how the muscle works. So it could be how hard the muscle pulls, or it could be the size of the muscle, then that also increases the strength. Or it could just be like how much that muscle can work before it starts to get tired, essentially.
Yep. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so we'll go into strength training first. So what makes you strong? Strength training improves force production, joint stability, confidence, bone density. So kind of like going into what you just mentioned, like the bones is what's supporting and lifting that weight. The muscle is just moving the bone. So when you do strength training, you're improving that joint stability, that bone density. So lifting can actually increase bone density. Aging resilience. So obviously each year after a certain age, we start to atrophy a little bit, which means we start to slowly lose a little bit of muscle. Testosterone tends to go down a little bit with each year for males. So by doing strength training, you're kind of combating that. So how to strength train? So just to keep it super simple, the best rep range for building overall strength is going to be in that like 1 to 6 rep range. So very low reps with heavy weight. So you want if you're going off percentages, it's going to be like an 80 to 95% of your maximal lift for that whatever lift you're doing, maximal load for whatever lift you're doing. The sets are going to be a little higher. So since the reps are low, you want to do a little bit more sets than normal. So it's going to be like 3 to 6 sets, sometimes even more. If we're doing like 2 reps, sometimes people will do like 8 to 10 sets of 2 reps, just to keep the volume up, which we'll talk about volume as well. And then the rest is important. So typically when you're doing these really, really heavy lifts, it's going to be, like think your bench, your squat, your deadlift, things like that. You're really using a ton of your central nervous system is taking a huge hit every time you're lifting that heavy load. So you have to let your body rest and recover so that it's prepared and ready for the next set to be able to do it optimally. So the rest is recommended about 2 to 3 minutes between each of those sets. So it might seem like a really long time, but it's 100% necessary, because if you went too short, which we also have some more information about, but essentially if you go too short, your central nervous system is still kind of shocked and it's not ready for the next set. Plus, that's going to lead to maybe a little bit of sacrifice in your form and technique. That weight might feel really, really heavy. You might not get all the reps that you're shooting for just because that your body isn't recovered from that last set. So why does strength training work? Strength gains comes mostly from the neuromuscular adaptations. So essentially, your brain learning to recruit more of those muscle fibers at once. So you might notice just after a few weeks of doing, let's say you're doing a strength training movement like a bench press, a squat, a deadlift, you might notice massive gains in your strength before you even gain any weight or muscle.
Right.
Because that neuromuscular strength, essentially your brain's ability to tell which muscles to fire at once, you're recruiting more of them, you actually will gain like a lot of strength. They kind of call it newbie gains, like right away. So your strength will increase very fast. So this is why people get strong quickly when they first start out, before they build muscle. So think of it like you're upgrading your brain to muscle software, right? So that's kind of like an easy way to think about it.
Yeah.
So that
one thing to point out with this is a lot of people think going heavy for small, like shorter reps, is what makes people bulky. Like a lot of women will say that, or even guys will be like, yeah, I want to bulk up, so I'm doing 5x5 or something like that. But really, with the strength training, what that is training, that's actually the opposite of bulking up. That's just training your body to be stronger and having the neuromuscular adaptations than actually like increasing muscle size.
Yep.
So that's why you see a lot of you can see Olympic weightlifters or some different like other athletes that need to keep a little bit smaller depending on like their weight class or something. They're most likely going to be doing either like endurance training if that's their sport of the weightlifting part, or a lot of them is most likely they're doing strength training in that very short rep range, like 1 to 3 even, probably not even 4, 5, 6. They're probably doing like 1 to 3 reps and just maybe like more sets, but like maximal effort, maximal power.
Yeah.
and they're not gaining size through that. They're just gaining the strength and explosiveness. So like their muscles aren't really growing in size. It's just their muscles are adapting and changing, and they're improving it different ways.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the next one that we'll talk about, hypertrophy training. So this would be like what most bodybuilders would utilize to get as big as they can. And what's interesting is if you watch a lot of bodybuilders, like there's tons of famous bodybuilders that have videos online and stuff. They don't lift crazy heavy weight.
No.
And actually, they're not even, they're strong, but they're not nearly as strong as some power lifters, Olympic lifters. There are some guys that if you looked at them, you're like, oh, clearly the bodybuilder could lift more. But if that guy's an experienced, power lifter, he might be half the size or, 25% smaller and be able to lift way more than him.
Yeah.
Just because that's what he's used to training. So do you want to go into hypertrophy training?
Yeah, I'll break that down a little bit. So yeah, this is, like you said, it's for guys that want to get big, like they're doing these, but it's also for like the definition, which is what most people are going for. Like they want to see their muscles. And so yes, hypertrophy is going to help grow your muscles, so that way you can see them.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're, if you're working on body recomposition, then you're simultaneously losing fat as you're gaining the muscle, and that's where you get that like toned look.
Yeah.
So as far as training for hypertrophy, typically in the 6 to 15 rep range. Research has shown between 5 and up to 30 reps can also simulate hypertrophy, if all the other factors are consistent too, with like intensity and things like that. But generally, that 6 to 15 is pretty good.
Yeah.
Our
typical protocol, like when we coach, is like that 8 to 12, sometimes 8 to 15.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what you would normally see. And if you're watching this and you are currently coming and training with us, we usually do hypertrophy for a lot of those accessory movements.
Yeah.
So that's where we're isolating certain muscles or certain muscle groups, and we're working on trying to kind of grow that muscle with the hypertrophy training.
Yeah, that's what I was also going to say, of like, depending on what type of exercise you're doing, which we'll get into like compound versus isolation later, but depending on what type of exercise you're doing, it's better to either stay in the lower rep range or the higher rep range within hypertrophy.
Yep.
And so I'll go into that a little bit later. But as far as sets, 3 to 5, even sometimes just 2 sets, if you're just adding on extra volume or something like that. Resting 1 to 2 minutes roughly. Somewhere it's kind of based on need of when you're able to push again. Like your muscles are probably still going to be feeling it. Like they should still be burned or pumped or a little bit. Bless you. But you should be recovered enough so that way, like, say if you're doing pull downs, like your grip shouldn't be limiting you.
Right.
So your grip should be fully recovered, so that way you can challenge your back or your biceps again. And that your heart rates come down enough, breathing, all of that. So that way that's not limiting you. It's not like your cardio that's being trained. Then it's actually the muscle that's being trained. Weight's got to be moderate to heavy. So the last 3 reps should be pretty challenging. It should be 0 to 3 reps from failure. So either going to complete muscular failure, where you cannot do it anymore without cheating. And you don't want to cheat on any of the reps. You want to keep good form and everything until you can't do it with good form anymore. That's usually a pretty good state, which you don't have to push all the way that hard every time. But I would recommend, honestly, like your last set of whatever exercise you're doing, push until you basically hit failure.
Yeah. We always say like last set's the best set. That's kind of the set that I'm going to be pushing it the hardest. And you definitely, like, this is how I personally train, and when I'm training clients, I always have them, like, that first set should be kind of like the easiest set. Like, you don't want to grab the heaviest weight that you're going to possibly do for that first set, like before you've even gotten that muscle warmed up. So maybe, like, if let's say I'm going to do a chest press and I'm going to do my hypertrophy and I'm going to do 3 sets of 10 reps. I know that I could probably get 80 pounds or 85, 90 pounds for 10 reps for like that 9 or a 10 RPE, like maximal. I'm not going to grab the 80s for my very first set. I might grab like the 70, 75, and I'm going to focus on that tension, just nice, good controlled reps, which we're going to talk about as well, which a lot of people get wrong. And then if that feels good, I'm going to go up that next set. And then that last set, like Bethany said, that's where I'm going to push it. I'm going to use the heaviest weight that I can under good form and technique, and might push it. Maybe I get an extra rep or two, right? In on that, like I think it's good to push to that sub max or max on maybe one set, like that last set is usually what I would do. But studies do show, like, as long as you go to like a 9 out of 10 RPE, like even if you have 1, maybe 2 reps in the tank for each of those sets, you're going to get very similar benefit. Like you don't have to go to failure every single set.
True.
And I think a lot of people get that wrong, like every single set. So if they're doing, 5 sets of 5 bench press or something, like they're going to failure on every single one. And you're not necessarily getting any further ahead. Your form is going to break down. It's going to be hard to recover from. So your risk of injury might go up a little bit too if you're going to failure every time. So understand that you can always have 1 to 2, maybe 3 reps in reserve or in the tank, and still get great benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. I will say that as far as like the RPE, if you've been training for a while, like what failure feels like as far as muscular failure, and what weight you can do and how many reps you can usually get with it. If you're new, it's very hard to know what your failure is. Like I've trained new people, and I mean consistent people too, even people I've been training for a while, and I'll say, okay, this last set I want you to do as many reps as you can until you can't anymore, until I have to pull that bar off you. And half the time they'll stop, and I'll be like, why'd you stop? And they're like, well, I don't think I can do anymore. And I'm like, did I have to pull the bar off you? And it's like, no. I'm like, okay, well then do a few more. And so they always get more reps than they thought they could, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh, I think even us, we might think, oh, we're doing this weight, well, maybe 5 reps. And then all of a sudden we have a good day and we get 8 or 10 or something to surprise ourselves. So it's good to test the limits, obviously safely, just to know where they are instead of just kind of guessing like, oh, yeah, that feels hard. And it's like, that's a 9 out of 10. And it's like, okay, but have you ever, if you reach complete failure at least like once or twice, then like, all right, that's my like hard stop line for it.
And the RP is kind of like a percentage too. So like, if you're doing a 7 out of 10 RP, you could kind of look at it like 70% of what you could do, sort of. So let's say, if we were training somebody and we were doing, 3 sets of 10 and, let's say we were using 20-pound dumbbells or something. And then in that last set, Bethany's like, all right, I'm going to have you do as many as you can. And they ended up getting 20 reps. It's like, okay, we weren't using a high enough weight because you got double the reps. So that would be like a 5 out of 10 RPE, about half, instead of, we would want to be at like a 7, 8, or a 9. So, hey, maybe next time we're going up to a 25 or a 30-pound dumbbell instead, right? So why does hypertrophy work?
So that's driven by 3 different things. There's mechanical tension, or just like load on the muscles. So that's just the weight being there. There's metabolic stress. So when you start feeling that burning in your muscle, metabolites get built up, like lactic acid. I think a lot of people are kind of familiar with that, especially if you're into endurance. Just like that burning, fatigue feeling, and then also muscle damage. So we'll get into that a little bit more later with like the eccentric, but we talked about that in the beginning with the small like micro tears that get repaired. So it's all 3 of those, all driven a little bit differently. Also depending on what exercise you're doing, how many reps, how much you're resting, each can get played around a little bit more. Like if you're doing higher reps of the hypertrophy range, you're probably going to feel a little bit more of that metabolic stress, that burning, fatiguing feeling. And then if you're doing like lower reps but higher weight, like that 6 to 8 rep range, that's a lot more of like the mechanical tension that's working on it. So depending on what range of hypertrophy you're doing, what you're going for, that can kind of play into it too. And just a quick statistic here, that after the age 30, adults lose 3 to 8% of their muscle per decade if they don't strength train. If you do strength train or do hypertrophy, then that either slows or reverses that. So you could keep all of your muscle. a really cool thing. I saw a picture of they did an MRI scan, or maybe it was a CT, might have been a CT, of an adult like male that was 30, and then his like leg muscle mass. So it looked like his leg was cut in half, and then you're looking at it from the inside, so you can see like the muscle and the fat and the bone. And so they had one when he was 30, and then one when he was 70. And then they had a triathlete do the same thing, 70-year-old and a 30-year-old. And the 70-year-old triathlete had pretty much just as much muscle as the 30-year-old athlete did, which was insane.
Mm-hmm.
But then compare that to the 70-year-old who did not do anything, there's like no muscle. It's like all fat, all squish. And oh my gosh, it's insane to just see the visual difference of how your body's affected by that.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Muscle also helps with metabolism, strength, bone density, healthy aging, joint support, and then obviously just confidence in how you look and feel, right? Mm-hmm. Muscle is what that lean tone look is for the females. You know, don't be afraid to lift weights and gain some muscle. I've been lifting heavy weights in quote unquote bodybuilding for 15 years, 5 or 6 days a week, and this is the biggest I've ever gotten, and I got 10 times as much testosterone as most females. So don't worry about getting big and bulky if you lift heavy weights, essentially. All right, so next we're going to get into some endurance training. So doing more without getting tired. So endurance lifting improves your ability to repeat work with minimal fatigue. So you're going to see endurance training in like circuits, our Metcons, high rep conditioning sets. So how to train for endurance. This is going to be like that 15, 20 and higher rep range. Typically it's going to be lower sets, so 2 to 4 sets. More of a light to moderate weight that you can move for those reps with good form and technique. And then the rest is also shorter. It's about 30 to 60 seconds. So you're going to have less of a central nervous system hit, but you're also trying to keep that rest a little shorter so that you can get the endurance benefit from it, the stamina. So how it works, high reps and short rest improve local muscular endurance, cardiovascular efficiency, lactic tolerance, and work capacity. So think of like your engine. So endurance training is really, really good for everybody to do. But it's especially good for athletes to add in. So you're not just training your sport. You should be doing some endurance training as well as that strength training, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a great add-on for everybody, really. But why? I guess we can go right into, is there anything else you have on endurance? No. Okay. So why the reps and the weight matter for every type of training that you're doing. So your body adapts to specific stress that you give it. So the heavy weight, low reps equals strength gain. The moderate weight, moderate reps will lead to that hypertrophy or building of the muscle. And then the lightweight, high rep will lead to higher endurance. Okay. That's important to point out, especially because, and it's gotten a lot better, but I feel like women already have that kind of belief that they need to only lift light weights, high reps to get toned. What you're really doing is just improving the endurance of the muscle. You're not actually building the muscle or gaining that strength that you want to get that lean toned look. So don't be afraid. Again, just don't be afraid of the heavy weights. Fun fact here, so muscle confusion is a myth. Consistency beats randomness every time. When you train with intention instead of chaos, you change faster. So number 6, this is kind of why I chose to do this whole topic, because we were talking about rest in Fit Camp the other day. So why rest between sets really, really matters. So rest is not slacking. You're not ruining your workout. You're not getting less of a great workout by resting more, as we're going to get into. It's a key variable that is going to influence your results. So for that strength training, as we mentioned earlier, like 2 to 3 minutes, maybe even 4 minutes for some lifts. Heavy lifting drains that nervous system, not just the muscle. So your brain needs longer to rest and recharge before it can have that force production. Hypertrophy, that 1 to 2 minutes. This keeps performance high but builds enough fatigue for muscle growth. And then that endurance is 30 to 60 seconds. Short rest keeps your heart rate elevated and builds that stamina. So now we want to get into resting too long. So a little extra rest is not a big deal, but if you're resting like 5 to 10 minutes, that can slow progress just because those muscles are going to begin to actually cool down. You're going to lose that focus. Your workout will drag on forever and ever. And you might get fewer total sets unless you're going to spend 4 hours in the gym or something, right? So the effect, less total volume equals slower progress. And you're going to kind of lose that. Like I've done it before where I've rested a little too long and you do the set and you almost feel cold again. Like you're not warmed up and ready for that set. So 2 to 3 minutes, 2 to 4 minutes is kind of that sweet spot. Here's more important. So this is going to be great for people that are doing personal training or group training with us. And part of it's just because we do a lot of conditioning and metcons and cardio. So it's easy to believe that you should keep the rest short for your strength training too. But this is actually where 90% of people make that mistake. So what happens when you rest too short or not enough time is that central nervous system is not recovered. You might start to lose reps. So let's say you're doing 3 sets of 8, but you only take on back squat, or 3 sets of 6, and you take maybe 45 seconds rest instead of that 2 minutes. You might not get all 6 reps, or those 6 reps you're going to sacrifice your form and technique. Maybe you really got to grind it out, and you lose that stability of your spine. So the risk of injury goes up. Maybe you don't get all the volume in. So your form is breaking down and those strength gains will kind of begin to stall. So strength training is kind of like sprinting. If you don't rest long enough, you can't sprint full force again right after, right? You've got to take a long enough rest to be able to have that output. So do you want to add anything on that? The rest?
That's good.
Cool. All right. Now we'll get into eccentric versus concentric. So this is also very fun and important because not a lot of people know about like the importance of eccentric training.
Yeah, especially so. One, it's for safety, but also for benefits too. So just to define everything really quick, eccentric is the lowering of the weight. So if it's for a bicep curl, it's easiest to demonstrate. It'd be lowering the weight back down. So that wasn't there. And then concentric is lifting the weight, lifting it up. Sciencey terms, eccentric means the lengthening of the muscle. So your muscle actually stretches out and gets longer as it goes down, right? Because you're here to here. And then when it's pulling, it's actually shortening. And so that's like pulling everything together. Like this is like the muscle fibers, right? So this is them at rest. So this is them at rest. This is probably a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so this would be concentric, shortening, right? It came together because everything's tightening up and pulling it together. And then this is eccentric as it's going back out.
Yeah.
Now, I love the visuals because people kind of get it then. Yeah. This is literally not literally, but a lot of what the muscles actually look like under a microscope. And so the eccentric phase, it actually produces up to 20 to 60% more force. So like you're actually stronger in the eccentric phase and you're actually able to stimulate more muscle growth because of, like we said, creating those micro tears is part of hypertrophy and muscle growth. And that's when it starts to stretch, that's when those micro tears start to happen. And so if you're not controlling the weight on the way down, or like for squats example, if you're not doesn't have to be slow, but if you're not controlling the weight down on the squat, you're not going to get as much of the benefits. Like it's not just the up part that's important, it's down part too.
I would say it's probably the worst with bench press.
Yes.
People dropping the bar down to bounce it off their chest. Yeah. They're actually doing themselves a disservice and they're not going to get as strong over time until they learned. And I think I use that word more than any other word when we're doing lifting is just control the weight. Control the weight, both up and down. So typically when you go down, it's going to be like a 2 to 3 second, movement. And on the way up, it might be even as fast as, 1 second, right? So obviously that force, that concentric is going to be actually it should be a faster movement than the eccentric or the lowering of the weight. So
I just always tell people slow down, fast up.
Yep.
Slow
down, fast up. That's a great, easy cue.
Mm-hmm.
People can remember that, right? Okay.
Next part, I kind of started getting into earlier, but like compound versus isolation movements or exercises. So a compound movement just means there's compound joints and muscle groups being used, whereas isolation just means that it's one joint or like one muscle being used at a time. So examples of this compound movement would be a squat, and that just means it's compound because between your ankle joint, your knee joint, your hip joint, that's all flexing. All the muscles around them are working.
Muscle groups. Yep.
The multiple muscle groups are being worked. Deadlift as well, lunge, bench, row, press, pull-ups. So all the like big movements, right? So they train multiple muscles, they burn more energy. Good bang for your buck exercises if you're short on time and you want to train your muscles as efficiently as possible. These are most likely done with strength, especially if you're doing with weight, like strength and maybe some hypertrophy, but ideally the lower rep end of hypertrophy to be able to push them, because you can go heavier to stimulate the hypertrophy, right? Certain like the body weight ones, I guess. So like, push-up, squat, lunge, those you can typically do higher rep for more like the endurance or hypertrophy side as well. But generally compound movements are more for strength. Unless it's just body weight, then it'd be more for endurance.
So it kind of just depends on load. Basically.
Yes, exactly. That's when there's little tiny variations. And then the isolation movement, so like the bicep curls, the tricep push downs, notice how it's just saying one muscle group. So it's just working one muscle and it's just moving at one joint. Lateral raises, leg extensions, hamstring curls. So just more for like strengthening or shaping an individual muscle. So more for the hypertrophy or even like the endurance conditioning part of it. Not really for strength. Right. We don't really do 1 rep maxes on bicep curls.
Nope. Bad idea. Seen a lot of horror videos on that. People tearing their biceps.
Yep.
Ripping the tendon right from there. Ugh.
Yep, not good.
Yeah.
How often should you train a muscle?
Yeah, how often? Let's see. Research shows that the best results come from training each muscle about 2 times per week. So this gives enough stimulus, enough recovery, better strength, and hypertrophy. Most adults feel amazing with 3 to 4 days per week of structured training. Okay. So we can kind of break this down or put it all together into a simple plan to kind of help you understand what to do. So if you were going to do 3 full body training days, which a lot of our clients do, we might perform 2 to 3 compound movements. So maybe it's like 1 strength training compound movement per workout, 2 to 3 accessory lifts. So maybe we've got an accessory in there for that workout. Actually, each day. This is saying each day.
This is each day.
We've got 2 to 3 compound strength movements, 2 to 3 accessory lifts, a short finisher or intervals for that endurance training. So this gives you kind of a little bit of everything. So you have the strength, the muscle, the stamina, overall health, the confidence, and it works for any fitness level. It's typically why we always try to structure like our group training, like even with Bethany's interval training, we're still trying to build in some resistance training and strength. So we have upper body, lower body, lifting movements. We've got some cardio movements with like the row or the bike, things like that. And then we always have some core and stability, like the our abs and core as well. And then with Fit Camp, we always start with our strength. Typically it's a barbell movement. Then we do an accessory or 2. And then in the Metcon, we have normally functional movements in there where you might even be working, your chest, back, legs, getting extra volume within that Metcon. But since the rest is so low, you're getting that endurance benefit from it. So that's kind of putting everything together. Anything else that you want to add on that?
Not too much. Just to for an example, for my class, we just do usually have some sort of like a compound lift. Doesn't have to be like a strength lift. It's just compound joints being used. I usually have like 2 to 3 of those, 2 to 3 accessories. Usually making sure we hit some sort of a squat or a lunge and like a hinge. glute bridge, something like that. And then, have like the endurance part of it more so, and then have like the core.
Yep.
And it makes it super simple and easy. And even though, so I have the rest timed. One thing is if you do supersets, so and how my class is structured is I do 2 exercises and you do 4 rounds of it, 25 seconds work, 25 rest. I mean, you could do this with reps and everything too if you did a superset. But having 25 seconds rest, you might think, oh, that falls under endurance. And really it's not, because that muscle group is getting over a minute rest. Because if you do bicep curls on the first interval and then you do squats in the second interval, right? So your squats are getting a minute and a half rest before you do them again. And then your biceps are getting a minute and a half rest before you do it again. But it keeps your heart rate a little bit more elevated to the point where you're burning a little bit more calories and just getting a little bit more like cardio benefit from it.
That's a good point, because typically like 90% of people that just come into the gym, they're just going to do like one movement for like their 3 or 4 or 5 sets. And so that's where they've got to just kind of sit there and rest for 1 to 2 minutes. Whereas for us, like, we want to get our clients through the workout as quickly and as efficiently as possible, so they don't have to spend 2 hours in the gym. So that's a very good point, is like, you could literally do, and I like to do like opposing muscle groups a lot, that. So like, if we were doing intervals of, let's say we're doing 25 on, 25 off, I was doing bench press, and then the next interval I'm doing bent over row. Okay, I'm working back and bicep on my bent over row, chest and tricep on my bench press, and I'm getting that like minute and a half rest in between those muscle groups. I can go back and forth. I can get twice as much work done, and my heart rate's a little bit more elevated than the guy that's just got to do just bench press for 4 sets of 8, and he's got to rest for 2 minutes between each set. So that's where we're able to accomplish a whole lot more within that shorter time frame. Awesome. So training isn't magic. It's targeted adaptation. Your body listens to the signal that you send. So lift heavy to get strong, lift moderate to build muscle, lift light for lots of reps to build endurance, and also just make sure that you're the other things that we kind of didn't, and I don't know why they weren't in here, was like volume and progressive overload, things like that. So volume is the sets times the reps times the weight. So an important thing to continue making progress is you always want to try to, and this is what progressive overload is increasing that volume every so often. So let's say for 4 to 8 weeks, you're doing a certain workout or lifts for 3 sets of 10. You do that for 4 to 8 weeks. Eventually, toward that 6 to 8 week mark, you're going to hit a plateau. You're going to get used to that. You're going to make the progress that you've made, and you're going to want to create a new adaptation by having progressive overload. So this is where you can add more reps, you could add more sets, or you could just add more weight to it. That way you're always kind of moving forward and progressing. We like to also switch up the variations that we do. So we'll have a periodization where, hey, for 4 weeks, we're going to focus on strength. So we're going to do compound movements, low reps, heavy weight. Do that for 4 weeks, create that adaptation in that movement. And then boom, we're going to switch to hypertrophy. So maybe we do some isolation movements, single muscle groups, and we're going to do kind of that moderate rep range, shorter rest. And then after 4 weeks of that, after creating that adaptation, we'll go to our endurance, where we're going to be doing high reps, short rest, and maybe going back to a little bit more functional or compound movements with that too. So just make sure you're switching things up and changing the volume and making sure that you're not just doing the exact same thing with the exact same weight all the time. You will definitely hit a plateau and lose that progress. So when you use the right reps, the right weight, the right rest, your training will finally start to work with you instead of against you. And obviously, if you want help figuring out which style is going to be the best, come talk to us. We'll be happy to sit down and see what's going to work the best for you based on your schedule, your goals and all that kind of stuff. So until next time, stay healthy, and we'll see you in the next episode.